The night is quiet over the Aegean. Waves lap gently against the worn stones of an ancient shore. Somewhere beyond the darkness, a fisherman's torch sways in the wind, a flicker of gold in a sea of black. And if you listen long enough, beneath the whisper of the tide and the hum of crickets, you can almost hear it. The faint echo of sandals on marble, the clang of bronze on bronze, the murmur of 1,000 debates under the shadow of a rising acropolis. This is Greece, or as the ancients called it, Hellas. Before it became the cradle of philosophy, democracy, and hoplite warfare, before it carved legends of heroes and philosophers into the stone of history, Greece was just a scattered collection of rocky peninsulas, islands, and mountain valleys. A place where survival wasn't guaranteed, and glory, if it came at all, came at the edge of a spear. But from this rugged, fractured land, two cities would rise. Two visions of what civilization could be. Two ways of life that would define not only their world, but ours. Athens, radiant, restless, endlessly curious. And Sparta, disciplined, relentless, forged in silence and iron. They were neighbors. They were rivals. And together, they would shape an age that the world would never forget. Let's rewind to the beginning. Far before the philosophers and the hoplites, before democracy and the Peloponnesian War. Let's go back to when Greece was still finding itself. It's around 1200 BCE. The great palaces of the Mycenaean kings, those proud citadels of gold and arrogance, are collapsing. Fire consumes the halls of Mycenae, Pylos, and Tiryns. The linear B tablets, the earliest form of written Greek, fall silent. The age of kings and heroes, the world of Agamemnon and Achilles, crumbles into dust. We don't really know what caused it. Invasions, internal wars, natural disasters, maybe all of the above. Historians call it the Greek Dark Age, which is convenient because that's exactly what it was. Dark. A few scattered settlements, no writing, no great art or architecture, just small communities clinging to survival in the shadow of something that once was. But darkness never lasts forever. Somewhere around the 8th century BCE, the Greek world begins to awaken again. People start to gather in new kinds of communities, police, city-states, each one unique, independent, proud. They build temples, they trade, they tell stories, old stories of gods and monsters and heroes. And slowly, the old Greek spirit, that mixture of ambition, pride, and endless curiosity, begins to stir once more. It's hard to imagine now, but Athens began humbly. Nestled in the region of Attica, it wasn't particularly fertile or rich in natural resources, but it had one advantage: location. Close enough to the sea for trade, far enough inland to be defensible. And most importantly, it had a knack for reinvention. In these early centuries, Athens was ruled by kings, hereditary monarchs who claimed divine descent. But as generations passed, that system began to feel outdated. The aristocrats, the wealthy landowners, wanted more power. And because human history is basically a long story of people wanting more power, the monarchy faded. The Athenians replaced it with archons, magistrates elected by the nobility. It wasn't exactly democracy. In fact, it was just oligarchy wearing a polite smile. But it was a start, the slow crawl toward the system Athens would one day be famous for. Now, Sparta's story is very different. Down in the rugged region of Laconia, surrounded by mountains and open plains, a group of Dorian Greeks founded what would become the most disciplined military society the world had ever seen. The Spartans didn't build their greatness on trade or debate, they built it on conquest. Early on, they conquered their neighbors, the Messenians, and turned them into helots, an enslaved population forced to farm the land. This was, of course, efficient, but it also created a problem. There were far more helots than Spartans. So, in true Spartan fashion, they solved this problem by turning themselves into the ultimate warrior caste. If your entire population might rebel at any moment, you make sure you're always ready to fight. Every boy was trained from childhood to serve the state. Every girl was trained to be strong, to bear strong children. Luxury was forbidden, individuality was discouraged, and weakness was simply not tolerated. Sparta became an army with a city, rather than a city with an army. And so, while Athens was building philosophy, Sparta was building soldiers. Two different paths, two different dreams of perfection, and both, in their own strange way, would come to define what it meant to be Greek. But the Greeks didn't live in isolation. Across the Aegean, an empire was stirring, vast, wealthy, and hungry. Persia. From the rugged mountains of Iran, the Persian Empire had expanded westward, swallowing up kingdoms and city-states like they were appetizers. By the late 6th century BCE, they ruled from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea, the largest empire the world had ever seen. And yet, there was this little problem. A few tiny, rocky cities on the coast of Asia Minor, the Ionian Greeks, didn't like being ruled. They rebelled. Athens, ever the meddler, decided to help them. Because why wouldn't a small city-state with limited resources decide to provoke the biggest empire on Earth? It's very on brand, really. The revolt failed, but the Persians didn't forget. And soon, they came for Athens.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before the drums of war echoed across the Aegean, before Marathon and Thermopylae, before the great alliance that would make Athens and Sparta legendary, Greece had to first learn what it meant to be Greek. In this early era, identity wasn't national, it was local. You were Athenian, Spartan, Corinthian, Theban, not Greek. And yet, there were things that united them. The gods, the language, the games at Olympia, the shared myths of heroes and tragedies. It was a patchwork of independence, constantly feuding, yet somehow bound together by a common spirit. If you stood on a hill in the 6th century BCE and looked across the land, you'd see marble temples rising in one valley, hoplite drills in another, and merchant ships carving paths through the blue Aegean. You'd smell olive oil and wine, hear the hum of lyres and laughter, and maybe, just maybe, feel the pulse of something extraordinary about to begin. Athens at this time was changing fast. The common people were restless, burdened by debt, ignored by their leaders. The city was on the verge of civil unrest. And then came a man named Solon, a reformer, poet, and reluctant politician. He was tasked with saving Athens from tearing itself apart. Solon did what most reformers do. He tried to make everyone a little less angry, without truly satisfying anyone. He canceled debts, freed debt slaves, and restructured political classes by wealth instead of birth. It was radical, but not revolutionary. And yet, it worked, at least for a while. The city stabilized, and more importantly, the idea that ordinary citizens might have a say in government began to take root. Meanwhile, down in Sparta, they were busy perfecting something far less democratic, the agoge, the brutal training system that turned boys into soldiers. At age 7, Spartan children were taken from their families and thrown into a life of discipline, hunger, and constant testing. They learned to fight, endure pain, and obey orders without question. They were taught that their life belonged to the state, that courage and loyalty were worth more than gold or art or comfort. It's not exactly the kind of childhood you'd wish on anyone, but it worked. By the time they reached adulthood, Spartan warriors were unmatched, fearless, united, and terrifyingly efficient. 2 cities, 2 philosophies, one believing that freedom made men great, the other believing that discipline did. And in the quiet before history's storm, both prepared, unknowingly, to define what greatness would mean.
The air over Greece in the early 5th century BCE must have felt electric, tense, but full of promise. Across the sea, Persian armies gathered. In the agora of Athens, people debated and dreamed. In the training fields of Sparta, shields gleamed under the sun. The winds of destiny were shifting. The world's mightiest empire was about to collide with a patchwork of city-states, each stubborn, proud, and unwilling to kneel. It was madness, and yet it was Greece. So here, at the dawn of the 5th century BCE, we find our 2 protagonists standing on the edge of legend. Athens, the city of words. Sparta, the city of silence. Both unaware that the fires of war would soon forge them into the twin pillars of Western civilization. And as the sun rises over the Aegean, painting the white stone of temples gold, one can almost hear it. The heartbeat of an age about to awaken.
The year is 490 BCE. Across the horizon, the Persian fleet glides like a dark wall of shadowed wings. Row upon row of ships, hundreds of them, carrying soldiers from every corner of the empire. Persians, Medes, Egyptians, even conscripts from as far away as India. They've come to punish a city that dared to defy the great king. That city is Athens. It's strange, really. The empire of millions against a city of maybe 30,000 citizens and some goats. But empires have pride, and pride doesn't forget insults. The Persians had demanded submission, a polite offering of earth and water. Most Greek cities complied. Athens did not. Sparta, predictably, threw the messengers down a well and said, "There's your earth and water." Because of course they did. And so the great king Darius sent his army west, across the Aegean, to teach the Greeks a lesson in obedience. A lesson that would begin on the plain of Marathon. Picture it. A wide, open field framed by mountains and the sea. The Persian army lands, confident, armored in silk and bronze, banners fluttering in the breeze. The Athenians march out to meet them. 10,000 citizen soldiers, farmers and craftsmen, wearing bronze helmets and carrying long spears. Their armor shines in the morning sun. They are not professional soldiers. They are men defending their home. They are joined by 1,000 allies from Plataea, a small city that could have easily stayed home, but didn't. Standing at their head is Miltiades, an experienced general who knows that the Persian strength lies in their archers, not their courage. And so, he decides to do something bold, something very un-Greek. He attacks first.
The charge of the Athenian phalanx at Marathon must have sounded like thunder, the pounding of bronze-clad feet, the roar of voices echoing off the hills. The Persians were caught off guard. They tried to unleash a storm of arrows, but the Athenians were already upon them, shield locked to shield, spear thrust forward, pushing, shouting, killing. The lines of the empire bent and broke. And by the time the dust settled, the impossible had happened. The Persians, the greatest army in the world, had been defeated by a handful of free citizens fighting for their city. The Athenians lost 192 men, the Persians over 6,000. Somewhere in that chaos, a runner named Phidippides supposedly sprinted back to Athens, 26 miles to announce the victory. "Rejoice, we conquer," he gasped, and then collapsed. Because of course, in Greek history, even triumph has to end in tragedy. The story may be myth, but the victory was real, and it changed everything. Athens had stood alone against empire and won. For the first time, they began to see themselves not just as survivors, but as chosen. And yet, the Persians were far from finished. A decade later, the great king's son Xerxes decided to do what his father could not. He assembled an army so vast that ancient writers gave up counting. Herodotus claimed there were over 1 million men. Realistically, maybe 100,000. But still, the largest invasion the ancient world had ever seen. They built a bridge of ships across the Hellespont, because when you're Xerxes and you want to cross a strait, you don't wait for the tide, you just chain boats together and walk over them. They carved supply roads through mountains, drained rivers dry, and marched west, a moving city of men, horses, and ambition. The Greeks, meanwhile, were panicking. For once, the fractious city-states realized that endless bickering wasn't ideal when a superpower was approaching. So they called a congress and miraculously agreed to cooperate. Sparta would lead on land, Athens at sea. An uneasy alliance was born. The two great rivals bound by necessity, not friendship.
At the narrow mountain pass of Thermopylae, they decided to make their stand. It was the perfect place, a bottleneck where the Persians' numbers would mean nothing. The Spartan king Leonidas took 300 of his best soldiers, the elite of the elite, and joined forces with a few thousand other Greeks. For 3 days, they held the pass against wave after wave of Persian attacks. You can imagine the scene: the clanging of shields, the screams of the dying, the smell of salt and sweat and blood mixing in the hot air. When Xerxes demanded they lay down their weapons, Leonidas famously replied, "Come and take them." It wasn't just bravado, it was the essence of Sparta, defiance in the face of the impossible. Eventually, of course, the Persians found a way around the pass, guided by a Greek traitor. Leonidas dismissed most of the Greek army, staying behind with his 300 Spartans and a few hundred Thespians and Thebans, men who knew they would die. And they did, to the last man. The pass was taken, but their sacrifice ignited something larger than any victory ever could. All across Greece, their courage became legend, a rallying cry. Even now, 25 centuries later, the word Spartan still means endurance, sacrifice, control. Thermopylae was not the end, it was the beginning. While the land burned, the sea became the next battleground. Xerxes' massive fleet clashed with the smaller, more nimble ships of the Greek coalition. Athens, under the brilliant and slightly egotistical Themistocles, had built a new navy of triremes, sleek, three-decked warships powered by rows of sweating oarsmen. He had convinced the Athenians to spend their newfound silver wealth on ships instead of luxury, because he somehow guessed that wooden walls would soon be their salvation. And he was right. After the fall of Thermopylae, the Persians swept south, burning cities as they went. Athens was evacuated, its people fleeing to nearby islands. Xerxes' army entered the empty city, torched it, and sat on the throne in the ruined Acropolis, the king of kings, victorious at last. But out on the water, in the narrow straits near Salamis, the Greek fleet waited. And there, Themistocles played his greatest trick. He sent a secret message to Xerxes, pretending to betray the Greeks, and lured the Persian fleet into the narrow channels where their numbers would be useless. At dawn, as the Persian ships crowded in, the Greeks struck. The sea erupted in chaos, ramming, splintering, shouting. Greek triremes darted between the cumbersome Persian vessels, their bronze rams crunching through wood and flesh. The sun glinted on water turned red, and when it was over, the Persian navy was in ruins. Xerxes watched from a golden throne on the hillside, horrified. His fleet, his pride, shattered by the very city he thought he had destroyed. He retreated soon after, leaving a general behind to finish the job. But the following year, at the Battle of Plataea, the united Greek army, led by Sparta, crushed what remained of the Persian forces.
The invasion was over. The impossible had happened again. The tiny, bickering city-states of Greece had defeated the greatest empire on earth not once, but twice.
And yet, victory can be a dangerous thing. The Persians withdrew, but the Greeks were forever changed. Athens, in particular, emerged transformed, its navy now the strongest in the Aegean, its confidence sky high. Sparta returned home, content with glory and caution. But Athens looked outward, toward the islands, the trade routes, the seas. They had tasted power and found it intoxicating. Themistocles became a hero, then an exile, because Athens was always Athens. It loved its geniuses just long enough to turn on them later. New leaders rose, new alliances formed. The Delian League, a supposed coalition against Persia, soon became something else entirely. An empire, ruled by Athens in all but name. But that's a story for later. For now, the embers of war still glowed on the horizon. In the quiet after the storm, the Aegean once again reflected the stars. Calm, endless, and deceptively peaceful. Somewhere in the ruins of burnt temples, Athenian builders began sketching new designs. For marble, for beauty, for immortality. And in the austere valleys of Laconia, Spartan boys trained beneath the same cold stars, their shields gleaming in moonlight. The war was over, yes, but peace, real peace, was something that Greeks would never quite master. Music fades into a low, reflective drone, like wind through marble columns. So ends the age of fire and bronze, an age when men faced empire and found themselves unbroken. From this crucible rose two powers: Athens, radiant and restless, eager to lead; Sparta, silent and steadfast, unwilling to follow. The alliance that had saved Greece was already beginning to fracture. And somewhere, beneath the pride and the triumph, the seeds of their rivalry were already taking root.
Soft strings, the sound of waves washing against marble docks. A breeze passes through olive trees. When the fires of war finally died down, Athens stood blinking in the morning light, battered, scarred, but undefeated. The city that had been burned to ash by Xerxes now rose from the ruins like a phoenix wrapped in marble. The Persians were gone, the seas were safe, and for the first time in memory, Athens looked out over the blue Aegean and thought, "We are free." But freedom has a way of becoming something else, something larger, something hungrier. It began innocently enough. After the Persian Wars, dozens of Greek city-states banded together to form an alliance, the Delian League. Its purpose was simple: defend Greece from any future Persian threat. Each member would contribute either ships or money, stored safely on the sacred island of Delos in the Temple of Apollo. Athens, of course, would lead the alliance, because Athens had the navy, the experience, and the charisma. At first, it seemed noble. The Greek world united in vigilance, keeping watch against empire. But as time passed, the Persians stopped attacking. The tribute kept flowing in. And Athens, well, Athens started getting ideas. The treasury, for instance, was moved from Delos to Athens for safekeeping. Of course. Soon Athens is using league funds to rebuild its walls, expand its fleet, and decorate its temples. When smaller allies protested, Athens reminded them, gently but firmly, that the league was a partnership. And partnerships, as everyone knows, are best maintained when one side quietly obeys the other. Within a generation, the Delian League had become something entirely different. An empire. an Athenian empire, built not on conquest, but on cooperation. Because nothing says friendship like paying taxes to your protector.
Meanwhile, far to the south, Sparta watched all this with a mixture of admiration and unease. To the Spartans, Athenian freedom looked suspiciously like chaos. All that talk, all that luxury, all those plays and debates, distractions. They feared what Athens was becoming: powerful, proud, unpredictable. And though no war was declared, tension hung between them like the hum before a storm. Sparta led its own league, the Peloponnesian League, a coalition of land-based states wary of Athenian ambition. Two powers now stood in Greece, one of words, the other of silence. One commanding the seas, the other the land. Balance held, but barely. Pericles, for his part, knew this. He also knew that Athens' greatness rested on fragile things: wealth, trade, empire, pride. And so he tried to make his city worthy of the power it wielded. Under his guidance, Athens became not just rich, but radiant. The arts flourished. Philosophers like Anaxagoras and Protagoras whispered that reason, not gods, governed the universe. Socrates, barefoot and odd, wandered the streets asking questions no one wanted to answer. Questions like, what is virtue? And can anyone truly know what's good? People rolled their eyes. Then they started thinking. And thinking, as Athens would learn, can be dangerous. But that's what made it glorious. It was a city unafraid of questions, unafraid of itself. A city that dared to believe that beauty and thought could be civic virtues. If you walked through Athens in this age, you would have seen it glowing with energy. Sailors unloading goods from every corner of the Mediterranean. Olive oil, marble, papyrus, spices. Artists chiseling statues in open courtyards. Philosophers debating under olive trees, scribbling in the dust with wooden sticks. Children chasing each other through the narrow streets. The smell of honey and roasted figs drifting from the market. Everywhere, light, laughter, noise, ambition. Athens was no longer just a city. It was an idea wearing marble. Meanwhile, far to the south, Sparta watched all this with a mixture of admiration and unease. To the Spartans, Athenian freedom looked suspiciously like chaos. All that talk, all that luxury, all those plays and debates, distractions. They feared what Athens was becoming: powerful, proud, unpredictable. And though no war was declared, tension hung between them like the hum before a storm. Sparta led its own league, the Peloponnesian League, a coalition of land-based states wary of Athenian ambition. Two powers now stood in Greece, one of words, the other of silence. One commanding the seas, the other the land. Balance held, but barely. Pericles, for his part, knew this. He also knew that Athens' greatness rested on fragile things: wealth, trade, empire, pride. And so he tried to make his city worthy of the power it wielded. Under his guidance, Athens became not just rich, but radiant. The arts flourished. Philosophers like Anaxagoras and Protagoras whispered that reason, not gods, governed the universe. Socrates, barefoot and odd, wandered the streets asking questions no one wanted to answer. Questions like, what is virtue? And can anyone truly know what's good? People rolled their eyes. Then they started thinking. And thinking, as Athens would learn, can be dangerous. But that's what made it glorious. It was a city unafraid of questions, unafraid of itself. A city that dared to believe that beauty and thought could be civic virtues.
Still, perfection has a price. Athens' empire grew heavy with tribute. Allies grew resentful, their contributions feeling less voluntary each year.
Some tried to leave the league. Athens sent fleets to remind them of the meaning of unity. Democracy, empire, art, all fed from the same source. And somewhere in the glow of golden marble, the first cracks began to show. For every citizen debating in the agora, a slave labored unseen. For every statue gleaming in the sun, an island paid in silver. And for every word of freedom spoken in Athens, another polis quietly wondered when freedom had been redefined. But for now, the illusion held. The city sparkled, its walls gleaming, its harbors full, its theaters alive with music and poetry. It was, as later historians would say, the moment the world was young. The perfect, impossible balance between intellect and ambition, between dream and delusion. If you stood on the Acropolis at sunset, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, you could see it. The Aegean glowing like liquid gold, ships returning home, the Parthenon catching the last light. Somewhere a flute would echo. Somewhere a poet would whisper lines that would still be remembered 2,000 years later. And you would understand, for just a heartbeat, what it meant to be Athenian, to believe that beauty and reason were not luxuries, but duties, to build not just for yourself, but for eternity, to chase perfection knowing it could never be caught. That was Athens at its height, a city that dreamed like no other before or since. But the gods are cruel to those who fly too close to the sun, and even marble, for all its brilliance, can crack. Because as Athens reached for immortality, Sparta waited in silence, sharpening its spears, watching its rival grow ever bolder. And the winds that had once carried Greek ships to victory now began to turn cold. The golden age of Athens was about to end, not in ruins, but in war. A war not between Greece and empire, but between brothers, between freedom and fear, between Athens and Sparta.
It began, as such things always do, with pride and fear. The year was 431 BCE. Athens stood at the height of its power, rich, confident, radiant under the rule of Pericles. Its navy ruled the Aegean. Its allies, or let's be honest, its subjects, filled its coffers with tribute. The Parthenon gleamed like a promise to the gods. And Sparta watched. For decades, the two cities had coexisted in uneasy balance. Athens ruling the sea, Sparta the land. Two halves of a Greek whole that never quite fit. But then came the spark. A small conflict in a small corner of the Greek world, Corinth and Corcyra. Two allies squabbling like children over influence and trade. Athens backed one side, Sparta, bound by alliance, backed the other. And suddenly, the whole web of Greek alliances snapped taut like a bowstring. Both sides claimed to be acting defensively. Both believed they were standing for freedom. And both were, of course, lying, mostly to themselves. War was declared. Pericles knew it was coming. He'd spent years preparing, strengthening the navy, building the long walls that connected Athens to its port at Piraeus. He understood Sparta's strength lay on land, Athens in the sea. So, his plan was simple. Avoid direct battle, protect the city behind its walls, and use the navy to strike where Sparta was weak. A war of patience, not heroics. It sounded wise. It even was wise. But wars, like people, rarely follow wise plans.
The first years of the conflict were strange, neither side truly winning, both too proud to yield. Spartan armies marched north each summer, burning Athenian farmland, only to retreat when winter came. Athens countered with naval raids along the Peloponnesian coast, striking ports, stealing supplies, showing off its power. And behind its mighty walls, Athens endured. For a while. Then came something no strategist could foresee, something not born of politics or ambition, but of nature. A plague. It swept through the crowded streets like a whisper that turned into a scream. Athens, packed tight behind its walls, became a tomb. Fever, delirium, bleeding, despair, entire families vanished in days. No one knew what caused it. Some said divine wrath, others foul air from the Piraeus. Bodies piled in the temples, the wells, the streets. Laws collapsed, faith shattered. Men who had once debated virtue now fought for food. And among the dead was Pericles, the man who had guided Athens through its brightest years, now dying alone, fevered and mourned by a city that was too broken to grieve properly. It was as if the gods themselves had whispered, "You wanted to be immortal. Fine, let's see how you handle it." After Pericles' death, Athens changed. The calm vision of reason gave way to noise, demagogues, populists, men who shouted louder than they thought. The war dragged on, shifting tides of fortune and folly. One year Athens triumphed, the next it bled. Alliances shifted, leaders rose and fell, treaties were signed and broken. The war that was supposed to be swift turned into a generation-long grind.
At one point, peace seemed possible. The Peace of Nikias, they called it, after the man who brokered it. But peace in Greece was like summer rain, brief, deceptive, and gone before anyone could enjoy it. Athens, restless and proud, wanted more. It wasn't enough to survive. It wanted glory again. And so, it made one of the most catastrophic decisions in history. The Sicilian Expedition. If the name sounds grand, it's because it was. A plan to invade distant Sicily, capture the city of Syracuse, and expand Athenian influence westward. Why? Because an ambitious young general named Alcibiades, handsome, brilliant, utterly reckless, convinced them it was a good idea. Alcibiades was Athens incarnate, clever, charming, impatient, and incapable of humility. He promised an easy victory. The assembly cheered. The fleet, hundreds of ships, thousands of men, sailed off into the sunset, gleaming white sails over blue sea. It was magnificent and doomed. Almost from the beginning, everything went wrong. Alcibiades was recalled to stand trial for sacrilege because apparently someone had mutilated the statues of Hermes the night before the expedition. And who better to blame than the city's most flamboyant citizen? He fled to Sparta. Yes, Sparta, and offered to help their generals destroy his own city. Because of course he did. Back in Sicily, the Athenian army floundered. Local allies deserted them, supplies ran thin, and when the Spartan general Gylippus arrived to aid Syracuse, the trap closed. The great Athenian fleet, the pride of the city, was cornered, crushed, and annihilated. Tens of thousands of men killed or enslaved. No one returned. It was not just a defeat, it was a collapse of faith. Athens had flown too far, and the sea had melted its wings. Sparta, emboldened, struck back hard. With Persian money, irony of ironies, they built a navy of their own. Their admiral, Lysander, cut off Athenian trade routes, starved the city, and one by one Athens' allies defected. Inside the walls, famine set in. Children cried for bread. The once golden city turned gray with despair. And in 404 BCE, after 27 years of war, Athens surrendered.
The long walls were torn down. The fleet was seized. Spartan soldiers marched through the city that had once called itself the teacher of Greece. No fires, no sack, just silence. A quiet, exhausted end.
They called it peace, but it felt like a funeral. Sparta now ruled Greece, the unchallenged hegemon, and for a time, they believed they had restored order, that their iron discipline had triumphed over Athenian decadence. But power, as Athens had learned, corrodes whoever holds it too tightly. Soon Sparta too would overreach, meddling in politics, waging new wars, ruling by fear instead of respect. And in the shadows, a new power stirred, one that would one day conquer them all. But that too is another story. For now, let's linger here, in the aftermath, in the quiet streets of Athens, where the wind moves through empty colonnades and the sea still glimmers beyond the ruins. The empire of ideas lies broken, but its memory is alive. Somewhere, Socrates still walks the agora, asking his impossible questions. Somewhere, a boy named Plato listens, thinking about justice. Somewhere, an old Spartan polishes his shield, remembering friends lost at Thermopylae. The war is over, but Greece will never be the same. In the end, the Peloponnesian War wasn't just the fall of Athens. It was the end of an age, the twilight of the Greek miracle. An age where men believed beauty and reason could coexist with power, where art and war, democracy and empire shared the same marble foundations. They discovered, painfully, that greatness carries its own decay, that the brighter the flame, the shorter it burns. And so the light of Athens dimmed, not extinguished, never that, but softened, scattered, carried onward through memory and philosophy and the quiet stubbornness of human curiosity. Even in ruin, Athens refused to be forgotten, and Sparta, silent as ever, faded back into its mountains, victorious but empty. The two cities that once saved Greece from empire had destroyed themselves in its image, and the echo of their struggle would shape the world forever. Time moves differently after collapse. Empires fall loudly, walls crumble, armies burn, kings die with speeches, but what comes after is always quiet. A silence that feels both tragic and inevitable, like the pause after thunder, when the air still remembers the lightning. After the Peloponnesian War, Greece was never the same. Athens, once the shining city on the hill, now limped along, politically humiliated, but still intellectually radiant. And Sparta, for all its pride, found that ruling the world was far harder than fighting for it. For a brief, strange moment, Sparta was supreme. It dictated terms to the Greek world, occupied cities, imposed garrisons, sent harsh governors to enforce order. But Spartan order was made for the mountains, not for the chatter of markets and the complexity of empires. They tried to lead a world that did not think like them, and soon enough the cracks began to show. Their rigid system, so perfect for defense, was hopelessly brittle when it came to politics, diplomacy, trade. The Helots rebelled again. Allies turned against them. And the other Greek cities, even the ones who had begged for Spartan protection, began to dream of freedom again. The unity that had once defeated Persia now dissolved into 100 feuding leagues and petty wars. The children of heroes fighting not for Greece, but for grudges, because, of course, they did.
Meanwhile, Athens found a second life, not in empire, but in ideas. Its navy was gone, its walls torn down, its colonies lost.
But the Athenians, stubborn as ever, turned inward. If they couldn't rule the world, they would try to understand it. And so began what might be the most remarkable afterlife any fallen city ever had. In the shadow of defeat, Athens became the world's classroom. Picture this: the sun rising over the ruins of the Acropolis, columns still broken, marbles still scarred by war. And beneath them, young men gathering in the agora, listening to an old man with a beard and bare feet ask questions that no one else dared to ask. What is justice, he says? What is virtue? What does it mean to live a good life? Socrates, the gadfly of Athens, was no general, but his words would outlast every sword. He questioned everything, and in doing so, built something stronger than walls. After him came Plato, the dreamer who turned Socratic questions into cosmic architecture. He imagined perfect forms, a world beyond the senses and a state ruled not by soldiers or merchants, but by philosophers. A rather ironic idea, given how his own city treated its philosophers. And then, from Plato's academy, came Aristotle, sharp, observant, practical. Where Plato dreamed, Aristotle defined. He wrote of logic, biology, ethics, art, astronomy, the first man to try to catalog everything worth knowing. Athens, once the empire of ships, became the empire of thought. Its philosophers conquered minds in ways Sparta never could with spears.
And yet, Sparta did not vanish. Its legacy was quieter, harsher, but no less enduring. For centuries, men would look back to Sparta as the model of discipline, of civic unity, of the soldier's life stripped to its essentials. Kings and generals, revolutionaries and tyrants, each claimed to be a new Sparta. They admired its simplicity, its courage, its defiance of luxury. Few remembered the slavery that made it possible. Fewer still questioned whether the cost of that perfection was too high. History has a way of polishing what it wants to remember. In time, even Sparta's supremacy faded. The Thebans broke their power at Leuctra, and then from the north came a new force, a kingdom the Greeks had once dismissed as barbaric, Macedon. Under Philip II and his son Alexander, Greece was finally united, not by philosophy or law, but by conquest. Athens became a patron of learning once more. Sparta withdrew into silence, and Greece itself, though politically conquered, became the seedbed of something far larger, a civilization that would carry Greek thought, art, and ambition from Egypt to India.
It's tempting, even now, to divide them neatly, to say Athens stood for freedom and Sparta for order, Athens for art, Sparta for war. But history, as always, refuses to fit in clean boxes. Athens could be ruthless, Sparta could be wise. Each, in its way, represented a different dream of human excellence. Athens showed what happens when imagination is set free, how creativity, democracy, and ambition can illuminate the world, and also how hubris and overreach can burn it down. Sparta showed what happens when discipline is absolute, how unity and simplicity can forge a people stronger than iron, and also how fear of change can turn strength into stagnation. Together, they form a single story, the endless human struggle to balance freedom and order, mind and body, chaos and control. Even now, their echoes linger. We still build cities that argue like Athens and defend like Sparta. We still debate their ideals in our schools, quote their philosophers, study their wars. We still tell their stories because they are, in a strange way, our own. We all live between Athens and Sparta, between curiosity and caution, between art and armor, between the dream of who we could be
and the discipline it takes to get there.
And if you walk among the ruins today, the stones of the Acropolis glowing pink in the late afternoon sun, or the quiet plains of Laconia, where olive trees grow where soldiers once trained, you can almost hear them still. The murmur of debate in the agora, the clash of shields on the Eurotas plain, the voices of a people who dared to live differently, and in so doing, defined what it means to be remembered. Because in the end, it was never just about victory, it was about legacy. Athens and Sparta both fell, but their shadows stretch across 2,000 years. Every book written, every law debated, every army trained carries a little of their memory. The thinker and the warrior, the dreamer and the defender, the two halves of the human spirit, forever at war and forever intertwined. Music swells, then fades to quiet strings. So as the stars rise over the Aegean once more, and the ancient sea sighs against forgotten shores, we leave them there. Athens, city of light. Sparta, city of stone. Both gone, both eternal. And somewhere in that vast silence of history, you can almost hear the whisper of an old philosopher, half smiling, saying, "The unexamined life is not worth living."